Welcome to the Freedom Driven Landscaper podcast brought to you by the Lucrative Landscaping book. Really happy to have you here today, Jordan. Would you please tell me a little bit about your business and your journey so far towards building it?
Yeah, absolutely. Jordan Smith, obviously, I'm from southern Minnesota, hour and a half south of Minneapolis, St. Paul. Started off probably like a lot of guys did. I was mowing lawns when I was a kid. When I say kid, I think I was around 12 years old. Did mowing for neighbors and friends and family. Obviously, I didn't have the ability to drive. So wherever I could reach by driving or pushing or walking a mower is what I did. That kind of evolved into doing some work for a guy from my church that was building some condos and that kind of thing. Did some light landscaping, planting beds, that kind of thing. And then after my senior year of high school, I went and worked for a hardscaping design installer um, locally here in Mankato, and did pretty well with that just for the summer for college. And after my freshman year of college, I decided to go off on my own and do hardscaping, landscape installs, and then continuing the mowing work and other maintenance type landscaping work that I had already established previously. So kind of rolled from there. Fast forwarding a few years, we got into commercial snow and ice, um, plowing snow, de-icing on a commercial level, started designing, implementing some custom built equipment into that business, liquid de-icing equipment, industrial snow plows. And that turned into a company called VSI, which designs and sells liquid de-icing equipment and metal plus hydraulic wing snow plows. We recently partnered up with Boss Snowplow on the liquid de-icing side. So Boss Snowplow now has the license and rights to that product. We work for them, help sell, promote, and educate on that product throughout the market. And then we formed a separate company after that acquisition to continue selling the hydraulic wing plows. That's a super
Cool.
short version of the last 15 years.
Right on. And so you went from working on your own to around how big is your team today?
If you count all businesses, boy, in the mid 30s or so, I would say.
Yeah, wow. Nice.
Seasonally changes, obviously. During a snow event, we might have more than that, but um, depending on the time of year and what services we're offering, it fluctuates up and down, but in that range.
Yeah, right. And then what's your day to day like these days? It's not mowing lawns anymore, I don't think.
No, no, no. So I actually, just recently, last summer, about a little over or a little under a year ago, I sold the green side of the landscaping business to a couple of the employees that were working for me. Um, Quite frankly, they had been running the company without me because I was busy with my BSI adventure. So I was a fairly passive owner at that point in that business. When it at least came to the green side, I stayed fairly involved with snow just because there's some synergies with what we were doing in the snow business, and then what we're doing with the equipment for the snow businesses throughout North America, I should say. Um, so it got to a point where I was so distant and passive to the green side of the business. They were doing such a good job. I wanted to give them that opportunity. If it was something they wanted, then they did. So we were able to make that happen. I think it was a win-win. Good deal for them and good for me too. Just, knowing that if those guys were to have both left or something, I wouldn't have had the capacity to take that thing back on. So able to retain all the staff, retain all the clients. It was a definite win-win situation there.
Yeah, really nice. So what was the key to eventually not being involved? I mean, selling it obviously is the ultimate key, but what was the key to
Yeah.
getting to being able to sell it like that? Was there yeah, what did you learn? What was the experience like? Was it did you get it done first try or how was that?
No, definitely not. No. Yeah, good question. So as far as the day-to-day evolution in my role, I mean, I again started like everyone else working in the field, um, hustling and working a lot of hours and, working in the business as you might say. As time evolved and as the companies grew congruently, I had no choice but to focus on a vision slash leadership role. Just because again, the size we were scaling to with multiple businesses that dictated that we had to make those changes.
So what
So
was
I
sorry to
shift,
interrupt, but what was that like? Like just to I might jump in a little bit just to get some more
yeah,
detail before
you're
you
good, man.
carry on. What was the indicator to that it was becoming to be too much? Like, obviously you're too busy, but like, what was there a breaking
Yep.
point? Like, a lot of guys have to break their legs before they get to that point. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like,
Yeah,
did that
yep.
happen to you or?
I was no different. Yeah, no
Oh,
different.
really?
It was honestly, yeah, it was honestly, um, you know, I I was working until 2 or 3 in the morning every night, not sleeping, just trying to survive, getting behind on important things. We always prided ourselves on quality and customer service, and it got to a point where even with that many hours being worked, I couldn't fulfill that to my highest level just because I was working so much and still not keeping up. So the issue kind of got forced. And, that's when I really started better understanding how to work on the business, not in it. That's when we started hiring some key people, key managers, operational people, salespeople, finance people. Because up until like 2015, I mean, I was still doing all the books. I was doing all the estimating, doing all the selling, all the business development, customer retention. I mean, HR, I was doing all of it myself.
Yeah.
Right.
So did you have like a
And
budget to hire for that at that point? Or like a lot of guys, they're at that
yeah,
point, but they don't have extra money. That's why they work until midnight, right? So,
yeah.
but
So, so
you
we,
were
we,
profitable enough. Yeah.
we were fortunate. Yeah. I mean, honestly, part of the motivation to keep us in like that is our margins were really good. And we were able to reinvest that money into the business. We were able to scale really quickly without taking on debt for a number of years. And that was appealing to me. But we did get to a point where I'm like, you know what, we need to invest these profits in the people so this business is scalable because this is not sustainable. So we first invested in good finance people to take over the ARAP, keeping the books straight, taking care of payroll, basic HR functions. I continued focusing on sales at that point. So now I'm out of the field. I'm starting to delegate some of my non-field related tasks. So finance came first. I continued with sales because that's really what I was most passionate and best at. That's where I brought the most value to the company. The next thing we hired on is operations. We were very fortunate at that time where we had a couple of foremen that were very good at operationally running their sites and their projects to where they didn't need a lot of supervision. So I was very fortunate to have those good people in place. But once we brought on an actual operations manager person, that made a big difference for us. Um, Beyond that, then we actually started bringing in some sales help. Um, so supplementing the sales that I was doing. Um, Trying to think if that leaves any boxes unchecked. We did bring in an HR person for a couple years. Um, we were not quite big enough to really need it, so she was continually looking for extra tasks to do. So we did end up delegating those HR related tasks to other departments. But that kind of filled the pipeline in a way where I was able to stay effective. I'm still working a lot. Don't get me wrong, mostly because there was multiple businesses involved here. But that did get me to a point where I could focus more on working on the business instead of in it. I would say it was around 2019 where the light bulb really went off that the contracting business was great. It's what built us to where we were, but it was taking the most of my time. I was spending less time on VSI, on the equipment side, and it was really flourishing regardless of my lack of attention. So I knew that if I put my time and attention into it, I could really, really do well. And that's when I actually stepped away and became more of a passive owner of that contracting business. And I focused purely on vision and business development for the VSI brand and company, which is more than likely why we were able to build it quickly enough and in a way where we attracted the attention of a company like Lost Snowplow.
Right. Yeah. So when you brought on these people to help you with the business, obviously that's going to bring down those awesome margins that you had that were
Yep.
really and getting you excited to rock and roll. Um, how did the margins play out after that? I'm kind of curious. Like one question that comes to mind is out of those hires, um, which ones had the biggest impact on your time, and which ones had the biggest, or and did any of them help to counterbalance their own costs? And then, or was the counterbalancing of cost more than just the ability to grow more? Like, so margins went down, but volume went up. So then overall it was
Yep.
higher. Like, I'm curious how those played out as you had those different roles.
Yeah. Great question. Um, I would say it was kind of um, a roller coaster type shape to that graph. Margins are up here as we brought those people on. It takes time for these people to be effective and to really to do the role. in a highly effective way. So margins crept down, down, down to a point where I was no longer happy with them. But right about the time we talked about slashing, cutting things back, they started to people started to get in the groove in their roles and really taking ownership of their roles, and they started going back up. Now we never did get back to where we were when I was doing everything, but I also wasn't working till 3 in the morning anymore. That was a worthwhile trade off because I
Yeah.
do have a family, I have kids. You gotta have time for things outside of work too. So I admittedly, I mean, yeah, the margins did drop substantially. I mean, as a percentage, they dropped really substantially. The company was still profitable. We're still doing well that way, but certainly not the type of margins we had been accustomed to.
Yeah. But then overall, just volume would go up through having more support. So then you can be making more profit
Correct.
at the end of the day anyways. Yeah. Interesting.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, it was a weird balance because I always wrestled with, do we want to scale? Do we want to scale the higher revenue? Um, there's sort of a I feel like there's sort of a black hole in that, depending on the type of business. Like in the landscape install business, that's a pretty high materials cost business. So your revenue is artificially inflated compared to like a maintenance business. I feel like there's a hole in that business from the numbers are higher now, but back then in the 2 to 4 million range where you're a big company, but you're a small company.
Mhm.
And it's kind of a difficult revenue range to make money. And I always thought, are we better off under that threshold and lower volume, higher gross margin, or are we better off just busting through that thing and taking the lower margin, but knowing there's more profit because we're a bigger company? Where
Yeah.
we ended up settling is kind of stayed in that black hole for a while, but it again, people fell into their roles and people um, really were loyal to the company, did good work, and really cared about performance, and we did work our way back out of it. But not going to say it was easy. I mean, I think it's a challenge, as we all know, anyone that's been in this business, it's a challenging business like any other. But yeah, it's one of those things where um, you could go both ways. There's guys that are super content and happy to stay smaller and keep those high margins, and there's other guys that have busted through it, and it's the best thing they've ever done too.
Right. And so you've busted through it more as more what I'm understanding. And
Yep.
is that would you recommend that? I of course it depends on the
Yeah.
person and whatnot, but like how do you feel about it? Would you ever go back after you are where you are now? Would you ever shrink down one day or do you think that you'd rather keep growing?
Yeah, no, I'm very growth oriented, so that's going to be my mode of operation. I don't know that everyone has the stomach for it necessarily. It depends what kind of owner and what kind of company you want to have.
Yeah.
I'm not risk averse at all. I'm fairly open to risk. I'm fairly open um, to taking risks to make big things happen. Um, but for some people, that creates so much stress that you can't even enjoy your day to day life. So
Right. And then you
it
can't
really
think
depends on the
straight
person.
and
For
yeah.
for me, the answer is simple. It's growth as long as it's done with the right vision. Growth is always going to keep you at the forefront. It's always going to keep you improving and getting better. Um, Sometimes if you just one day decide, we're perfect at 1.5 million, you could probably do well for 3, 4, 5 years, and all of a sudden it's like 1.5 million is the old version of
Right.
a million, and now and all of a sudden you're really falling behind, and you don't have the money to invest in new technology and new people. So I think the old adage, if you're not growing, you're dying. I do think that applies here.
Yeah, I agree too. From a company culture standpoint, I haven't seen a company be able to keep ambitious employees and also not want to grow at all.
Right.
That's the biggest disconnect that I've always seen is the little guys who say nobody wants to work for me. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
nobody does want to work for you because there's no vision with you. Like, where am I going to
Right.
be in 5 years from now? The same
Right.
place, or like that's not great. Yeah,
It's a
interesting.
great point.
So
Yep.
I think it depends on the market too.
It does.
I'll get all bent out of shape on guys who are like, this is how it is and this is how I want it to be and like get off my case, and in my
Yeah.
Facebook group, I try to have like a growth culture in there. So I push back pretty hard on the guys who say, I just want it to be me and my truck.
Mhm.
But one thing that I can forget sometimes is there's a lot of market in the States that doesn't have potential for growth. And
Right.
that can make me look like a bit of a jerk if I'm saying like, come on, let's do
Yeah.
it. Let's grow some millions. And they're looking around at the fields around their house and they're like, what business? You want
Well,
me? Yeah.
and honestly, that leads in pretty well to what I was going to say is because of the way I'm wired for, um, high ceiling type growth is what I'm always looking for. I'm looking to push hard and grow fast and do the newest and latest and greatest things. I did feel a little bit capped. We're in a what you call like a micropolitan market here, 100,000 or so population. So it's not a tiny market like the prairies of South Dakota or something like that, but it's also not Chicago. It's not New York. It's not Los Angeles. You're not going to be a $50 million landscape maintenance or landscape install company. Just not going to happen. Whereas with the other business I have and that I've built, we're selling on a national and international level. Um, there really is no limit there. There's a number, but it's way bigger than what
Yeah.
most people would ever consider reasonable for a landscape type company,
Yeah.
and that excites me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, me too. Yeah. No, I was noticing it just like in even who we're reaching out to speak to on the podcast and stuff like that. We were looking at proximity to different city sizes for potential for growth because
Yep.
otherwise it's a really different conversation of how to grow in a really limited market. Yeah, it's a whole different strategy. It doesn't, a lot of the scaling strategy doesn't apply at all, really. So
Yeah.
it makes sense why some people will come to me and say, like, I don't understand what you're talking about at all. When I'm talking about like
Yeah.
balancing acquisition, cost of acquisition across channels and,
Yep.
like saturation levels of different channels and all this stuff. And they're like, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah.
so- oh, that's
Well,
the disconnect. Yeah.
it's true, and honestly, that sparks another memory too. Like when we were looking at like how do we push past a certain threshold in revenue and growth, the only option for us was to expand into additional markets. So set up additional offices in different cities, different markets. Minneapolis, St. Paul is the closest one. We were looking at that market. We were looking at a couple other nearby metropolitan areas, and it's not that I think we certainly could have done it if we would have dedicated all of our time and resources to it. But because I had this other opportunity that was growing quickly, it was like, do I really want to try to expand and grow into multiple markets with this business that I'm already half in, half out of, or do I want to focus on the company that I feel like has this ridiculous, tremendous upside? And I'm not discouraging anyone from doing what I said that we talked about doing. I think there's opportunity if you have the right business model, the right processes. You can scale any business to multiple markets. But I don't think it's necessarily possible with one primary visionary within the company to do that with multiple businesses at the same time.
Yeah. That's interesting. A moment ago, you mentioned when your new hires got into the groove of things, that's where margins started to improve. Um, I'm trying to think of which roles would have had the biggest impact on that because, like HR, well, you mentioned that got absorbed into something else. It could have a big impact, the right people.
Yep.
The accounting and bookkeeping, I mean, you can save some costs, but it's probably not going to make a huge difference. It's,
Yep.
which was it sales then that made the
Sales and
biggest
business
difference?
development.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Because again, for me, that's what I was best at, but I'm only one guy and I was spread thin. So when we brought in, um, and I'll be honest, we didn't have super great success bringing in rock stars. We had some failures there. But the few that we did, we really started to see scalability there when we brought them in, and that it wasn't just me selling the work. That made a big difference.
yeah, what were you doing? What were the kind of activities were you doing for business development?
When I say business development, I'm primarily referring to just customer retention, customer relationships. We're very being in with that business, being in a smaller market. Relationships are, you know, ultimately important. I mean, it not that not that a strong personal relationship with a customer is the only success metric, but if you have a strong relationship with them, you do simplify your business quite a bit and create some scalability there because anytime they need something, they're calling you. They're only calling you. You're going to treat them fair. I mean, we were to a point with most of our clients by the time that I switched my focus to VSI where we didn't have to bid any work. It was all time and materials. They knew we'd do a great job. They knew we'd take great care of them. I wouldn't call it a conventional business model as far as the customers I was working with at the time that I was splitting my role. Our other sales guys were going out there and, bidding work, estimating work, acquiring new customers. I was more focused on retaining our biggest and best and maybe adding one or two a year.
Right. Okay. So just for the guys that are wanting to follow in your footsteps, when you're hiring those roles to help you with that, with the acquisition and being out there doing that, um, do you have an idea as to like a picture of what they would imagine that role would look like if they were trying to get somebody to do that, to do similar to what you were doing?
Yeah. To the role I was doing
No,
or to the role my sales
well,
guys
what
were.
yeah, I see what you were doing, and that makes I think that's what a lot of guys are kind of already doing as the owner,
Yep. Yep.
that like
Yep.
they're the relationships person,
Yep.
chief relationships
Yep.
officer. But what I think I see a lot of guys struggling with is creating like like a number two type of role in that sense
Yeah.
where what like
Yep.
how do you like, they don't know any of your clients. None of your clients really know them or trust them. I guess they trust your brand, but it's not
Yep.
you, so it's hard to pass them
Yep.
on. And then what do they do to stay busy every day? Are they cold calling? Are they, you know what I mean? What are they? Are they
Totally.
just waiting for the phone to ring? Like, what kind of activities
Yep.
did you have them on?
Yeah. Great question. So, first and foremost, the main thing that I always, always, always stressed with these guys is be very prompt. Like, this sounds crazy, but in our industry, if you answer the phone, you just put yourself ahead of 90% of companies because a lot of them don't answer the phone. So answer the phone when someone calls, meet with them quickly, provide them pricing estimating quickly, tell them how you're going to deliver that and when you're going to deliver it and do that accurately, consistently. And then make sure that your operations team passed off a good, clean scope of work so they know exactly what they're supposed to do throughout the process of the install or maintenance, whatever it might be. Follow up with the customer, make sure they're happy, make sure things are going as they expect. When the project's done, follow up again, make sure they're completely 110% happy if they're not. Great touch point with customers is to go there and do the final little touch ups. I know you're a sales guy, but if you need to go sweep off a few patio bricks because there's some sand stuck to them, like that's an easy thing to do. And it's a good time to sit and chat with your customer too. So that was kind
Would
of
they
our process
so
is follow up and
sorry
follow
to
up.
interrupt you. Would they wait for a
Yep.
call? I love the details. Would they wait for a call to know to go back into that sweeping, or are they going back and doing the final check themselves?
Yes. So the method that we used is, and I wouldn't say it was this way exactly every single time. I always thought I wanted it to be that way. I don't know if we actually got there in my tenure. But it, was supposed to be, we had the proven process, right? So it starts with the initial phone call consult. And on that consult, we gave them, the general idea of what their project might cost. Sometimes you just blow people out of the water. They think a patio is going to be $5,000 and it's 50. Like
Right.
you just give them a general feel like, hey, this sounds like a $20,000 project. Do you want an estimate still? Yes. Okay, perfect. You get there, you create some camaraderie with the potential customer at that point. You take the actual site dimensions, you follow up quickly with the bid. Again, hopefully you sell the job, you follow up on that. Once you sell the job, you make sure the operations has a very clean installation package with all the details they need. At that point, you start a continuous daily or every other day, depending on the size of project, in person or phone, check in with the customer. Everything going well? Are you happy with everything? Is everything as you expected? Um, you know, every day or every other day, again, depending on the cadence of the project. If it's a month-long project, every day is too much. If it's a 2-day project, then once a day might not even be enough. So you got to kind of find that rhythm. Then again, once the project's done, follow up with the customer. Sounds like the crew will be done today. How's everything looking? Okay, it's looking good. I'm going to come through for a final walkthrough and just make sure everything looks good. If you're around, come out and say hi. During that final walkthrough, and to me, that's kind of like let's get confirmation from the customer that they're totally satisfied. That helps avoid issues like customers saying like, "Ooh, I'm not paying my invoice because, you left this little piece of sand on my bricks," right? So just verbally talk with them and say like, "Are you happy with everything?" And then if you see anything, if the sales guy sees anything like, "Oh, there is some sand on that brick," even if the customer doesn't say like, "Oh, I'll clean that up for you. Don't worry about that. I'll take care of that." And again, that's a good time to build, additionally strengthen that relationship, make sure they're totally satisfied. Um, and then the project's hopefully at that point you're done and their role is done and on to the next one. As far as the follow up, we always did ask that they follow up a month later. Just say, hey, it's been a month. How's everything looking? Still happy with everything? Are all your plants alive? All your papers look good, or whatever the case may be. And that was always another good touch point, because a lot of times the customer would realize, like, man, we love it, but I wish we would have put, a privacy screen here. Like, okay, well, there's an upsell opportunity. Now we can sell another job. And then we typically had them follow up the following spring as well, just to make sure everything survived winter, make sure all their plants came back, make sure none of their papers received, and that kind of thing. So that was our typical process. And again, I can't honestly tell you that I know that was followed through on every time, but I do know that our good guys have had a very high success rate with new clients. So must have done something right. But I honestly do believe, if you take nothing else out of this, just be present, be available, and that will get you and retain work for you, because a lot of people in our industry are not that way. I mean,
Yeah.
I constantly heard, like, man, it took 3 weeks to hear back from anyone else, and you were here and had a bid for me in 2 days. Like, that's such a
Yeah.
big difference.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I'm happy I asked that, because that's a really great walkthrough you just gave. I don't know that a lot of people are aware of that. There's a lot of landscapers that are really good at landscaping, not necessarily at, the human side of it. Yeah, that's so
Well,
cool.
and I think if you want a tangible example, if you search for the proven process EOS is an entrepreneurial operating system, something you can run your business on to help scale. The proven process is part of that. If you search that in Google, it'll show hundreds of different companies, examples of the proven process. It's usually a 4 or 5 step process that you do every single time. And you make your clients aware that this is your process, and do it every time. And by doing that, you create consistency, and customers like that.
Cool. Yeah, I'm aware of EOS from traction, but I'm not aware of the proven process. That's really neat. You mentioned
Yeah.
the 2-day turnaround. I was waiting to ask that. What was your target? So somebody calls, you answer right away. That's great. Give them a ballpark. What's your target time to be meeting with them after that first call?
Yeah. So I probably pushed a little too hard. I was always pushing for, if they were available, 24 hours, try to meet with them within 24 hours. That's not always realistic. Salesman schedules do get busy. They do have to continue taking care of existing customers, not just focusing on new business. And then the people who are looking for the bid are probably busy too. So, um, I think we settled into like a 3 to 4 day window typically, but 24 hours is what I always push for. If they call at 2 o'clock um, 2 o'clock on a Monday, then hopefully you can meet with them by 2 o'clock the following day.
That's
Definitely
awesome.
didn't always work that way, but again, that I honestly truly believe that probably sold us more jobs than anything. It's just having that promptness and that availability to make that stuff
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, because then they expect that the whole experience is gonna be similar. From, what about from actually, booking the installation work? A lot of guys try to book, like, as far out as they possibly can. Like, how was
Yeah.
that for you? Was it, like, really prompt and then they had to wait 6 months, or what kind of turnaround did you get on that stuff?
So we had a pretty unique system that wasn't always the easiest operationally, but it was good for customers. So we had at the time, at one time we had 4 scheduled out crews. So these are crews that are scheduled out typically like 12 weeks. If you want to be on one of their schedules, there are certain projects that only those crews could do. They were very complex retaining walls, multi-tiered, lakeshore work, multi-tiered patios, outdoor living spaces. Like, those guys are booked out a little ways. We also had like an on-call crew. So if you have a graduation party coming up and you need new plants and rock put in the front of your house next week, we can do that. It's going to cost more, because we're going to be there next week. We're going to bid it today. We're going to be here next week, but it's going to cost a little more. And we typically tried to keep that crew 2 weeks out or less. And that, again, operationally was challenging, because when you do that fast to turnaround on an install, you have to get materials ordered. You have to get plant materials ordered. You have to get logistics set up. You have to get utilities marked. I mean, there was a lot of challenges with that, but it did help us sell additional work, because a lot of people, they want stuff tomorrow, and there's no landscaper, hardly any landscaper on earth, at least not one worth hiring, that's available tomorrow. If they're available tomorrow, it's probably because they're brand new or they aren't very good, right?
Yeah, totally.
So with us having a great reputation in our local market, having that crew, was a big deal because, we were a company that had a good reputation and well established, but we also can get there quickly for certain jobs, not every job, but for certain jobs. Most
Yeah.
people aren't doing $100,000 multi-tiered patio on a week's notice. So it wasn't a
Yeah.
problem.
Fair enough. But that's pretty neat to hear though that you're able to keep a crew like that busy in a not a tiny market, but a smaller market. Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
inspiring. Yeah. I could
Yeah.
actually see an entire business of just that model just because of um how brutal it is to get people in a timely manner, if that was your
Right.
whole that could be your whole positioning is like we'll do small installs in less than a month. Yeah. Yeah,
It, if I'm being honest, we talked about it. And this is bringing back a lot of memories. It's been a while. So just to be transparent, this is 4 or 5 years ago. This isn't yesterday. But the issue is that that type of work was always the least fun work. It was like, a lot of hand tear outs, a lot of just laying rock and weed barrier, a lot of digging in trees, a lot of hand digging out old stuff because we don't want to tear up their turf because they probably have an event at their house the next day. Right. So it was not fun work. And because of that, it was hard to retain crew members on those crews or on that
interesting.
crew compared to the other crews. Cause the other crews are doing super cool stuff. Like, they do these cool projects and they end up on our YouTube channel and they'd end up on our Facebook page and all these rave reviews from the clients. And, the other guys are doing little front gardens and they look great, but it's not like show stopping. So they did
Yeah.
the harder, less fun work with less gratification, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, especially when they're comparing against the other ones. If you didn't have the other division, maybe it
Right.
wouldn't have been so
Right. Good
relatively
point.
bad.
Good
Yeah,
point.
I
Yeah.
wonder. But that's really fascinating that you're thinking in those terms in terms of culture. That's something that I work with my clients a lot is not just bringing in leads or sales, but sales specifically in the type of stuff that you want to be doing so that you can hire people and have margin and get
Yes.
on the upward spiral. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you worked in terms of culture and stuff like that? It sounds like it's something you've thought about.
Yeah. I mean, culture is like, so I would define my role, my highest and best role at any business that I've had or currently run, is I'm the visionary and I'm the culture leader. Um, Culture is like, I mean, it seems so obvious to say, but it's so vital to a successful company because you can't retain people. Like I told you earlier, like we brought on people and it took a while for them to get to groove. Replacing those people, we would have started over again. And now those margins, instead of going like this, they would have just gone like this until we're either dead in the water or have to restructure.
And
So retaining
how
people is
patient
extremely
are you?
important.
How patient were you in that just to get a feel? Like, was that years or weeks or how long would you say? What would be your recommendation for those kinds of big hires that you brought on? How long would you give them to figure out their job if you did it again?
I would say 3 to 6 months, depending on like if the culture fits perfect, but the performance is a little slow, they get more slack. If the culture fit is like 80% of perfect, which is kind of our minimum threshold, they have to be a little quicker. If the culture fit's not quite as good, we need the performance to be better. If the performance is not as good, but the culture fits 100%, then we have a little more slack there. So I think
Okay,
three to
cool.
6 months is a reasonable expectation depending on the size of your company.
Yeah, and then are you using EOS methodology for measuring culture
We
there?
do.
Okay,
Yeah, so EOS is very culture driven because you only hire, fire, and review people based on your company's core values. Literally, we just did reviews last or 2 weeks ago, and the top four categories in the review are the four core values, and we measure against those. Um, and if they don't check three of the four boxes, they're not retainable as an employee. Like you
right.
have to be 75% or better, and that's the minimum threshold. I said 80% earlier, but I think if you take 3 out of 4, it's actually 75.
Yeah,
But
close enough.
you know, if, yeah, if you don't check all those boxes, or three out of 4 of those boxes, you're not retainable as an employee, and you're either um, not going to fit at all, or maybe you're in the wrong seat, and that's causing you to not act the way that you actually are. And
Yeah,
that's something I feel I'm pretty good at is assessing people. I have a good feel for people that fit in our business and that don't. It doesn't mean we always put them in the right role or position right away. But if I know that they're 100% culture fit, we'll always find a spot for them. And we've been very consistent in that. And because of that, our turnover, besides with the, the lowest level labor, our turnover is incredibly low. Like we have the same. I mean, a lot of our managers and higher level people from the landscape business, they're now working at the BSI business or the farm equipment business because they like the culture that our companies have and they want to stay in that, even though they're not in a role they were originally hired for.
Yeah, cool. So with EOS, they talk about being above or below the bar, and you have your rating scale for each core value that you have,
Yep.
and there's all that stuff. They talk about you say that if they're below it once, they had like a whole warning system, where you had like a
Yeah.
month to fix it. And do you subscribe to that, or are you more harsh about it? It sounded like you don't have much of a second chance.
I, I'll be transparent again. I'm not. I'm more of a what's the word for it? I'm more of a gut feel guy. Like I have a pretty high emotional intelligence, you'd say. Like I can read if someone is being who they actually are, or if they're just acting out because of a bad situation or bad circumstance. So I tend to operate on, and I'm not always right, but I do tend to operate on like I just know this guy's not a good fit, or I just know this gal's not a good fit, or I know that they are, and they're just in a hard spot right now. So we've had a few times where we had exceptionally good people who scored exceptionally poorly during certain times because, as it turned out, they were in the wrong role. They had something that was bothering them, and they weren't speaking up about it. And typically, I've had a pretty good feel for when that's the case versus when they're just not a fit. I think I want to say we use a modified version of the scale that US has. I mean, their scale basically is there's three boxes. Either they never meet this core value, they sometimes meet this core value, or they always meet this core value. If you have any nevers, they don't fit. There's no exception for that not fitting. You have to have, I believe it's at least, I don't remember the exact number. I think it's 75 or 80%. 75 or 80% of your marks have to be always, um, and you can have one or two that are sometimes, depending on how many core values you have. I
Yeah,
think that's the official scale. But if anyone's never, and we have subscribed to this, if they get to a point where we realize, okay, these guys are never going to be this way, they're not a fit anymore, and we are transparent about that, and we let them move on to somewhere else.
right.
We,
Yeah.
we won't even try to re-roll those people.
For for somebody who isn't as emotionally, or I forget what was the term that you used? I like that,
Emotional intelligence. I don't know if
yeah,
that's the right
emotional
term
intelligence.
either.
Yeah, I know what you mean though. With somebody who isn't in tune with that, with their gut on that, um, do you think you could sort of break down what you're feeling? Do you know what I mean? Like some guys are paranoid and it's like they're always thinking everybody's out to get them. And so for them it's
Yeah,
probably pretty tough. Like for you, like is there anything like what kind of things would you let slide and what kind of things would be not acceptable? Just to like
yeah,
I know
yeah,
it's intuitive to you, but I bet if you sort of
yeah,
explained how your mind is working, we could mimic that?
yeah, yeah. Um, it, it's it's probably deeper than this, but I think from a high level, um, trying to think of a relatable example, like if an employee, verbally lashes out at another employee, let's say it even happens 3 times, and, like, it happens enough where, okay, it's, coming to my level, like, "Hey, this is a problem, these 2 guys don't get along." Um, you can look at other trends, like the way that you've seen them interact with clients, the way that you've seen them interact with vendors, the way that you see them interact with their families at company events, which we do a lot. I think that's another great culture builder. And you just know that they're not that person, but they're clearly in a place where they're in in a place where they're not getting along, either in a role or on a crew where they're not getting along with someone on that crew. I think it's kind of like the sometimes, the never, the sometimes, and the always. Like if they're checking the sometimes and always boxes and all the other categories, and they just have this one employee or this one situation they're not working well in, um, I think that's where it's derived from. Like I think I think maybe the way you define emotional intelligence is it like takes an aggregate of who you see the person as and how you see them operate in their everyday life, how they greet you in the morning, how they, come and BS be in the office after work. Kind of build an aggregate of who this person is, and you just know if something's out of character or if it is their character, right? So that's not a super concise answer, and I think that's
Yeah.
why if you actually look up emotional intelligence, it's a pretty deep topic because there's not real concise answers to it.
Tough to
It's kind of
measure.
like an algorithm in your head, I think. Like, it's a
Yeah.
big topic like with AI right now too. Like, is AI gonna have emotion? Like, well, it can probably learn it.
Right, if you give it all the factors, and that's kind of what I'm trying to extract out of you. So, I guess also it's like you're in tune with the core values is a big piece of
Yes.
it, because I think a lot of companies, uh, I think they abandon their core values out of desperation, sort of, or I don't wanna say
Yes.
laziness, because they're
You're
usually
right.
just, like, overwhelmed, and so it's like, yeah, this guy is a bit of a jerk, but it's way easier to have a jerk around than to hire a whole new person, that kind of thing. Like, did you
Yeah.
ever feel that there was a tipping point? Like, did you have to fire enough people before you really start to feel like you were good at it? Or was it after a certain number of employees that you hired before it started to click for you? Or did you always feel like it was natural to you?
No, no, we honestly, I think what I learned the most from is that the ones that I screwed up. We did have a number of cases where I did exactly what you just said. We had, a division leader, a crew leader that was exceptional operationally speaking. Like they ran profitable jobs, they ran a profitable division of the company. They were prepared at meetings, they had their work done, but everyone hated them. They were not a good culture fit. And it was,
Yeah.
because of the way that they talked down to people or whatever the case may be. There was times I looked past that and I had people come ask like, man, this guy's he's a disaster and he's hard to work for and I don't like it. And I'm going to quit. And like, but yeah, he's making us a lot of money, and it is really easy to do that. It is. And
Yeah.
I can count, I mean, just without thinking deep, I can count 3 times that happened where I knew probably 2 years prior that this person wasn't a fit, but I kept him around because of the financial benefits of it. That was never the right choice. And I won't do it again because of that. The 3 that are in my head right now, those 3 situations, essentially derailed entire portions of the company and took a number of years to get back on track.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
had I just taken care of it at the time when in my gut, knew it wasn't right, we could have avoided that. Now, yeah, we would have lost some short-term profits, but not as much as we lost long-term because of the fallout from keeping that person around. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and again, I still don't claim to be perfect, but I do know that when I see a red flag that's big enough for me to pause, I know that it's something that needs to be addressed right away and not 2 years from now.
Shy down
So
for
I
that.
learned by screwing it up.
Right. Yeah, there's a name for that exact situation. I can't think of it off the top of my head for that, like, it's like, toxic alpha or something like that. There's a name for it where it's a super common phenomenon where you have that, like, very profitable and effective employee who everybody hates. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yep.
And then I guess you could it's like, maybe it's super counterintuitive because it's like, does everybody hate him because he's just outworking you? You know what I mean? Is it like,
Right.
is
Yep.
it so like, are we going to make the culture worse by getting rid of him and just like letting everybody be
Right.
lazy? Sort of, not that, you know what I mean? Not to be harsh with my words, but like,
No, that no,
yeah,
you're nailing it.
yeah, that's a really tough call to, like, fire your biggest producer because everybody doesn't like how much they're producing. Well, the way that they're producing
Right.
too, but yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, that's tough. I've seen a bunch of companies that have that situation where they have somebody in their business that knows a lot, and and then the owner isn't confident in replacing them because they kind of know more than the owner knows. And so
Yep.
it's like, how do you the biggest thing that I think I've learned recently, even in my own experience, where I'll deal with, I just had it just the other day where I'll deal with a slightly smaller business and it'll get to the point where it's like, hey, yeah, like, send me access to your accounts and I'll take a look at things. And they're kind of like, oh, I don't know, like, can you sign something? And I'm like, you'd be happy for me to look at your account. Like, there's nothing I'm going to borrow from you. Trust me, we're going to just make your stuff better.
Yeah.
And then I'll talk to a much bigger business, and the owner's just like, yeah, sure, here.
Yep.
And it's weird. And the best thing I could come up with was that when you get to a point where you're no longer hiring for things that you actually know how to do yourself anymore, your skill set switches from being able to vet people for, like, how good they are at their job to just pure, like, recognizing character, I guess.
Yeah.
And so it's like I guess it goes, it kind of, I guess, I guess that's sort of what your job becomes as you, I've
Yep.
never had that many employees, like 30 employees or whatever, but I think that that's, at that point, it's like you can't test everybody to see how, I mean, at low, some maybe for like basic
You're right.
jobs or whatever.
Yep.
But so how do you test somebody's character when you're hiring them who you haven't had a chance to work with for 6 months? You know what I mean? Like, because you really don't want to do the 3 to 6 months with the wrong guy, right? Like,
Right. Right.
how do you have like an interview process for hire for not necessarily for a labor position that's more routine, but like if you're gonna hire like
Yep.
a CFO or something like that, like how somebody who maybe has far more experience in their area of expertise than you do, how would you approach that, or what would you think about in that sense?
This is again where I'm probably not the best guy to ask. And again, I'm not always right, but I do have a good success rate with that gut feel. You get in an interview. We do have a routine interview process. Like we do follow one. If I'm being honest, I don't have it memorized. We have a sheet we use, and we do ask specific questions to the role. But when we interview, we can't ask any of the illegal questions about family or kids or whatever. Like we don't do any of that stuff. But if people want to bring it up on their own without us prompting it, that always sparks a pretty good discussion. And I can usually get a pretty good feel for who someone is, and just to speak to a higher level position. Like if we're bringing someone in for that interview, we probably know they have the relevant experience for that role already. If it's a higher level hire,
Yeah,
um, so at that point we go based off character. We go based off how they interview. We go based on how the interview feels. And some people are professional interviewers. Like we've been fooled by that before. But it is a lot of gut feel for me. And I always have someone with me, depending on who we're hiring. Like I always have a second opinion because I uh, can't just go off of my feel alone. But typically speaking, we agree at the end of the day. The other thing is if it's a really high level hire, like C level, we don't really have C level people, but like our vice presidents or presidents or CFO type level people. Those are typically multi-interview processes. And one of the things I like to do if the candidate's open to it is I like to just go out to dinner, usually bring a spouse if they have one, um, bring my spouse. And that creates an even more transparent environment where you can't really hide much. You can't be a
that's a good
professional
idea.
interviewer in a dinner setting when you're out with your spouse. And I can't claim that's an original idea. I think that's a Dave Ramsey thing. Honestly, I think he's the one that talks about going to make a decision to hire someone big, go out to dinner with your spouse. But I believe in it because
Yeah,
that's an environment you cannot hide and you can't lie. You're not going to sit and lie in front of your spouse unless you guys are scheming together. You're
yeah.
going to be you're going to be yourself, and if you're not, you're going to watch the spouse react like, "Who is this guy? Like this isn't my husband or this isn't my wife." You're going to see him react that way. And I've never
Yeah.
had that happen. Usually if we get to that point, we're pretty confident we're going to hire him. Um, and at that point, it's, if nothing else, it's a camaraderie builder with a potential new employee spouse. But I do like that method. I do think
Yeah,
there's value in that.
that's cool. I think I've heard similar before, somebody saying, like, if you wouldn't have a meal with them, don't hire them. Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I mean, in just a casual conversation, there's so much revealed. There's so much data that comes out. Even the way they talk to the waiter, the way they
Totally.
talk to each other, the husband and wife.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh man, it's like your firewall is just like disabled. Yeah.
Seriously. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, it's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing how much it can change the environment. And again, fortunately for me, I think we've done that with 6 people over the years. So we're not talking about 50 different people here. Every single time it's been like, oh, this confirms exactly what we thought this person was. Like they are exactly who we thought they were. Now we're comfortable. We're going to make them an offer.
Yeah. Cool.
And, and again, at that point, we feel like, my wife and I, we feel like we do a pretty good job of being welcoming and stuff too. So at that point, now the spouse feels welcome too. And that just starts the whole thing off on a better foot too.
Yeah.
First they go into work, the spouse isn't skeptical, like, oh, this new job, what if it doesn't work out? Like they go into work saying, hey, these people are cool, like they're fun people. It's gonna be great. Have a great first day
Yeah.
at work. It just
Right.
changes the vibe.
Yeah, you have the whole team on board when the spouse
Yeah.
is involved. Yeah, that's cool. I have
Huge.
2 more questions. I see our time
Yeah.
running out here. Hopefully, I can keep them in my mind. First one was, what are you like? What are the not? You don't have to tell me your specific criteria if you don't want to, but like what culture do you think is important? Like what kind of factors should landscaping or any business even? Because part of BOS is like they leave it pretty open-ended as to what can be those I'm losing the word, but the
No, you're good.
factors
Yeah.
that are involved,
Yep.
and I've seen companies have really different ones, from like, we're gonna have we care about money, to like, like
Yeah.
they can really vary. So like what kind of value, that's the word, values. What
Yeah.
are which ones have you found over time matter the most and that you're watching the most?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the big thing I look for, and just because this is the big thing for me in my success, is just a passion for whatever role you may be looking to do. I know it's hard to get someone passionate about digging holes in the ground if you're hiring a laborer, so it's maybe not as relevant there. But again, I haven't been in a position to hire general labor in a number of years. So, when we did, we certainly looked for people that had a passion for the outdoors, and they don't mind the heat, and they like being outside, and they like nature. Like, it sounds cliche, but guys that like to hunt and fish, and guys that farm, like, those are pretty good candidates to be landscape guys because they already like that environment. Whereas if you have an office jockey who likes, working on a computer and playing video games, you hire them to be a landscape laborer, like, you're starting off in a pretty rough foot there, right?
Hmm.
But when it comes to especially higher level and definitely sales and marketing, like, they have to have a passion for whatever industry or cause that you're working towards. And that's not something you can fake either. Like, you can pull that out of an interview pretty quickly, even if they don't know a ton about the subject matter. If you can just find underlying passion for a cause, like, we want to make the snow industry a better place. We want to make the landscape industry a better industry. And you can see that they genuinely care to make an impact and make a difference on a broad global scale. That means that they're going to do the day-to-day things that drive them towards that, which is going to be good for your company. So passion's a big one. And that, again, that's the thing for me. And any, the biggest advice I can give anyone is, if you're doing something you're not passionate about, like, I don't care what you do, it's probably never going to work. You can force yourself to get out of bed, and there's some guys that probably make a ton of money on stuff they're not passionate about. I get that, but if you want something sustainable and long term, you gotta be passionate about it. And you gotta hire people that are passionate about it too. So that's the biggest one. Um, Another thing is curiosity. So that's kind of an odd word, but, like, they may have a passion for this, that, and the other thing, but again, we always want to be growing. We always want to be improving. So finding people that are curious about what's next, or what's the new big thing, or again, how can we change the industry, whatever industry we're in, by doing something different. You know, and again, maybe not for a guy that's digging holes. I get it, but when you start talking about management, sales, marketing, like, having people that, the big hot button topic I already mentioned once right now is AI. Like, AI is the talk of everything, right? Doesn't mean you need to be passionate about AI, but to be curious is a good thing. And it doesn't mean that you're even going to get into anything related to AI, but just the fact that you're curious about how it could impact your industry, like, that's meaningful to me.
Cool. Thanks for that. Yeah, you sort of answered my last question, but I'll ask it anyways.
Yeah.
When you said the biggest thing, what are there any last ideas that you'd like to share but while we have time to together? It could be a big thing or a little thing, doesn't matter. But any last things you'd like to share?
Yeah. I think we drew it out of this conversation really well, actually. And I do appreciate your questions have been really good. So nice job with that. You never know on a podcast. Sometimes they're like the most generic questions ever, and yours are really thoughtful. So good job on that. But I think the big thing is just not being set on doing what you've always done. Like, for me, I I will never regret my time in the green industry. I still love the green industry. I have a lot of friends there, but the green industry led me to what I'm doing now. And what I'm doing now, I actually enjoy even more than I ever enjoyed the green industry. And again, I still love the green industry. But the point is that, and even like we talked about, maybe you start a business with just doing the 2-week turnaround cruise. Like, that's a cool idea. Like, it probably could work. Honestly, there's going to be some challenges like any business, but don't be so set in your ways that you just keep doing the same things over and over again. Now, you could argue also if things are working great, why change it? But things only work great the same way for so long. The world is constantly changing. Customer needs are always changing. Um, Market conditions are changing. Equipment's changing. Everything's changing. So we need to be we need to be adaptable and be able to pivot and don't be scared to make some of those decisions. Like if you see an opportunity in your current business that could lead to maybe a different business opportunity or maybe changing the direction of your current business, like don't shy away from that because those can be some of the biggest and best opportunities that come your way.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's really good advice for landscaping industry too, because so much of the industry is so far behind the times. So it's not that hard to be in the future in this industry, and the
Right.
people and the businesses that are the ones that are cleaning up. It seems so. So yeah, not being
Totally.
afraid to try something new, especially in this, it gives you a serious advantage. So yeah, that's great. Yeah, no. Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much for your time today, and I really appreciate speaking with you. This has been really nice.
Yeah, man. Hey, thanks for having me on. We'll hopefully talk to you again soon.